Well, thanks to you all for coming out on this snowy Chicago morning. I'm Dave Radcliffe, and I'm director of the Center for Alternative Technologies at Virginia Tech. And I'd like to talk for a moment here about evolution and evolution between forms of media. To begin with, evoking Yochai Benkler's wonderful book, The Wealth of Networks, and I'm going to try and give you the 30-second account of a century's worth of evolution in media. Benkler distinguishes between handicraft media, mass media, and digital media, and talks about their economic and social implications. And the short version is basically this. Imagine a world prior to mass media, when information and entertainment were things that were provided at home. If you wanted music, Joey played the violin. If you wanted information, Aunt Flo read the newspaper around the breakfast table. This was how things were before 1920 and the introduction of electronic media, which revolutionized the delivery of information and entertainment. Obviously, in the period of mass entertainment, there were new alternatives. Instead of listening to Joey play the violin, one could buy Jascha Heifetz on RCA red seal discs and hear a better violinist. You had to pay for it, of course. Instead of listening to Aunt Flo read the newspaper, you could turn on the television and watch Katie Couric read the newspaper. Much better eye makeup. In the digital arena, we return to something like handicraft production once again. Joey's GarageBand can issue MP3s and make them available on the internet for all and sundry. Aunt Flo, of course, has her killer political blog that you wouldn't begin the day without reading. These are forms of production that are not very expensive to produce, but they have the extended reach of the mass media. Anybody with an internet connection anywhere in the world can be exposed to Joey or to Aunt Flo. What does this have to do with ECCO? Well, ECCO is also about the migration of media from one form to another. It was originally a microform collection, of course, the 18th-century collection, a very large, very fine, and very expensive and very scarce microform collection, which suddenly became available to all and sundry who had infinitely deep pockets in which to have access to this information. I suppose I can include myself among the discontented with ECCO. My library just laughs at me when I suggest that we make this purchase, and I'm very aware of the economic implications of this sort of method of delivering information. There's a difference between microfilm distribution and digital distribution, which has to do with its form of manufacture. Obviously, it's much more expensive to deliver a 10,000 reel microform collection than it is to deliver a 100 or a 1,000 reel microform collection. But those sorts of differences don't necessarily translate into the production of microfilm on digital. Once the microfilm is already in hand, as it is with most of these products, what one has to do is to digitize it. With digital production, the expenses are almost all up front. One has to purchase equipment. One needs to write a software program to perform the OCR and to assemble the product. But after that, you turn on the machine. And apart from some necessary tweaking, it really doesn't cost 10 times more to do 10,000 reels as opposed to 1,000 reels. The size, because of the nature of the digital medium, matters much less than it does when you're distributing things on a physical medium like a book or like a microfilm reel. This means that potentially, at least, products like ECCO can be made available at much less cost than when you're offering physical objects such as a book or microfilm. Thus far, we haven't seen these cost savings. Then, too, part of the difficulty with ECCO is that it was really conceived as the 18th century collection online. That is, as microfilm. a product that would be directed at research libraries and a few scholars who took an interest in very obscure 18th century pamphlets. This is perhaps a perverse way of thinking about ECCO. The potential audience for a product like this is not the small thousands of people who currently use it, but the potential audience for a product like this is literally millions of people who want access not to an obscure microform collection, but want access to 18th century literature online. And because there are so many potential readers for a product like this, it's easy to imagine a different kind of marketing strategy which was based on digital distribution over the web, which could make potentially much greater profits while serving potentially much greater numbers of people. One finds oneself in the 18th century at a comparative disadvantage to our colleagues who work in the 17th century or the 16th century or the 19th century, because so many more of them have access to facsimiles and searchable digital databases than we do because of the price point involved with ECCO as opposed to, say, Google Books or Evo. There are also social implications to think about as we move from one method of distributing media to another. And Benkler is particularly good on talking about the interactive dimension of web-designed media as opposed to mass media. ECCO does so many wonderful things. I mean, it's a very powerful tool and not to be snubbed. But when one thinks in terms of evolution, one can imagine other things becoming possible down the road. It's like a mass media process in that it posits the reader as a passive receptor. It's like watching Katie Couric. One reads it. But you can do more than just read with digital text, and as we learned from a variety of other new media, it encourages readers to interact with text, to become not only consumers but producers and modifiers of electronic texts. And this suggests possibilities for ECCO as well. So far, the evolution has been somewhat unfortunate. Joey made his HTML edition of The Rape of the Lock all by hand. It took him several weekends to do it, right? But it's now been displaced by ECCO because ECCO is so much more convenient. You just direct your students to The Rape of the Lock in its various incarnations. And that gives you something that's much more useful than the HTML version.